Welcome to the Animal Training Academy podcast show. I'm your host, Ryan Cartledge. I know that you're here because you want to master your animal training skills using a force-free approach. And to handle the variety of challenges you face, you need a broad knowledge and experience base. The problem is, we all get stuck and hit rough patches in our training, which can leave us feeling overwhelmed and helpless. Our mission since 2015 is to empower trainers just like you. The Animal Training Academy has helped thousands of trainers globally to develop skills, gain confidence, and positively influence both animal and human learners. Here's how we can do the same for you. Sign up for our membership waitlist at www.atamember.com. Register when our doors open email arrives and start growing your training skills. Build impactful training practices benefiting you and those you train. So join the waitlist at www.atamember.com. And while waiting, enjoy this free podcast show. We want to see you avoid embarrassment, overwhelm, and burnout. Instead, we want to see you build resilience to setbacks, get more organized, and grow your training skills and knowledge. In short, we want to see you enjoy confidence in yourself as a trainer and lead a fulfilling life, positively impacting the lives of the animal and human learners you work with. Well, we will start today's episode where I'll be talking to one Andre Yeu. Andre is a renowned figure in the dog training world, celebrated for his significant contributions as a faculty member at the prestigious Karen Pryor Academy and as the founder of Hounds Fly Dog Training. Transitioning from a career in technology to entrepreneurship in animal training, Andre has successfully led When Hounds Fly to become a leading institution in the field, with several locations across Toronto and Vancouver. These locations are staffed by a committed team of full-time trainers, reflecting the Academy's excellence and dedication to positive reinforcement training methods. Andre's expertise is widely recognized and sought after by various media outlets, establishing him as a prominent voice in canine behavior and training. His journey into dog training, which began with the adoption of his beagle, Duke, underscores a heartwarming and inspiring shift towards a deep-seated commitment to positive reinforcement techniques. Andre holds a bachelor's degree in commerce from the University of British Columbia. On a personal note, Andre's life is enriched by his partnership with Heidi Hashimoto. Together, they have navigated the joys and sorrows of pet companionship, mourning the loss of their beloved rescue beagle Phoebe last year. In a heartening turn of events, though, their family has since welcomed Mikey, a one-eyed American bulldog mix, demonstrating their ongoing commitment to rescuing and providing a loving home for animals in need. So without further ado, it's my very great pleasure to welcome Andre to the show today, who is patiently waiting by on the other side of the world in Canada. Andre, thank you so much for taking the time to come and hang out with me and us at Animal Training Academy.
Ryan, it's a pleasure and an honor to be a guest on your show today. So thanks so much for having me.
Well, I love to learn about, just sit back and listen and learn about people's stories and their odysseys. And we heard about some of the learners that you've shared your life with and currently share your life with in your bio. So I'm looking forward to hearing more and getting insights from your journey with them. So let's dive straight in. Andre, I was hoping that you could take the listeners back and share with us where you first got started, where you first learned about animal training, about positive reinforcement, and share your story and some stories from your story with us.
Sure. I began my journey in animal training at a very late age. So many bios of professional dog trainers talk about how they remember having dogs as like before they could walk or speak. But I didn't actually become a dog guardian until my late 20s. And this comes back to the fact that children of immigrant families in Canada, at least, coming from the Chinese diaspora, they didn't get dogs back in the 80s. Traditionally, dogs are looked at as luxuries for Westerners and or dirty, and they're kept on the street. So, or just too much of a hassle, like all the cleaning and feeding and walking. And my partner Heidi, who is Japanese Canadian, also had a similar upbringing where she actually would beg for a dog year after year, and it was always no, no, no. And she would even wake up on Christmas. They're not Christian, but we always expect gifts anyways. And she would imagine that there would be a dog in a box hidden somewhere for her on Christmas Day. But finally, our time as adults, independent adults in our late 20s occurred. And we started thinking about adopting a dog because we started seeing people in our peer group who were upwardly mobile. Our professional careers are starting to take off, which gives us disposable income. We had our own place, dogs everywhere in the neighborhood. That sort of introduced the idea to us of maybe it's time we have everything in place, stable home, a budget, and time. And my journey began when a board administrative assistant or receptionist at our office was basically sending emails to different employees in the organization of rescue listings. And one crossed my inbox, and it was a beagle named Duke. And the picture was extremely endearing to me. And I didn't know anything about rescue at the time, so I foolishly thought that all rescues were going to be mixed breed dogs of different ages or different breeds that were indeterminate. So here I am seeing this rescue listing of a purebred dog, a beagle, and I thought that that'd be one in a million. So I hastily forwarded the listing to Heidi, who was at work that afternoon, and she wrote back saying, "Can we? Could we?" And the next thing you know, we applied. The interview went really well because obviously two adults that have their own place and have a lot of time and money would be a good home. And we were approved for the adoption. And I remember driving out to the country to go pick him up because his backstory was not typical. He wasn't actually in a shelter or even in foster. This was a rescue that was helping out with a rehome. And he was actually a working beagle that was kept outdoors in a kennel 365 days a year for 3 years in Ontario, where it gets bitterly cold. And he was used for hunting. So he absolutely reeked. I don't think he'd ever been bathed. And I remember having him in our car, and the whole car smelled like a barn. And we drove him from rural Ontario into the heart of downtown Toronto. And that's really where our journey began. Brand new dog owners bringing a dog into a city and not really knowing what to expect.
And for those who aren't familiar with Canadian geography, that's not a short drive, is it?
No, I think it was about 2.5, 3 hours.
Oh, is that all?
Yeah, it doesn't take
To
too long
Toronto.
to.
Yes, I'm
Yeah, it's
thinking
Toronto.
Vancouver.
Yeah, it
My
doesn't take
mind's
too long
somewhere
to
else.
get to the country. But so it was an afternoon trip. But I'd certainly never been to this part of this place before. You'd have no reason to.
Okay, so I'm imagining you and Heidi who have this idea of what dog ownership is based on your experiences and the media and marketing and whatever that is. And so you're driving there to pick up this idea and to have your life changed into this idea that you have in your mind. And you meet this hunting dog who's never been bathed and potentially, tell me if I'm wrong, potentially immediately that idea didn't quite match the reality of the stinky hunting dog that landed in your car?
Well, there was a honeymoon period for quite a while.
Yeah.
Probably of about 2 to 3 months, maybe 1 to 2 months. I can't quite remember. But we didn't know it at the time, but basically the honeymoon period, I think, was just because he was completely shut down and overwhelmed. Now, within a year after getting him, we looked back at the old photos and we knew what to look for at this point. His eyes were like saucers. They were shiny and glassed over. He was always panting and he had stress lines all over his face in most of the photos that we took of him. So because he was in a state of being over threshold perpetually, even though he's a beagle, he would still eat, and he was responsive to cues if we were using food as a reinforcer. Like, he seemed functional, but he was really overwhelmed. But even back then, I remember how I sort of got started. I relied on some of the handouts that the rescue gave. And one of the handouts I still actually have and I repurpose. It's just basically basic rules about what to do when you bring home a new dog. Like, don't throw a party for them, don't have everybody come pet them. Keep it quiet, give them space. Um, so I got some good advice from them. We knew to buy a crate, we knew to get a leash, we knew about all the basics and to look into food. Um, and for the first month or two, it was pretty good. But what happened shortly thereafter sort of informs how it was good information, but it wasn't enough. And I'm going to relay a story of where I think either it may have happened anyways, or it may have been because of this incident that I allowed to have happen. He became quite dog aggressive at month 3, and it became a real challenge to get him back on track. But I will never forget the moment at around month 1 or 2. We were still enjoying him not being reactive. Whether it's because he was overwhelmed and shut down or he wasn't reactive, I'll never know. But Heidi and I had gone for a walk, and we walked into the neighborhood supermarket. And for those of you that are in Toronto that listen to this is the Liberty Village Metro, which Liberty Village is a very dense neighborhood, even was 15 years ago, where there's a bajillion dogs. So, and you don't bring dogs into the supermarket, at least not in 2007. And I decided to stay outside with Duke while Heidi went in to pick up some groceries. And outside, while I was waiting, there was a dog that was tied up to a pole unattended. And it was just sitting there minding its own business. And the breed is unimportant, but it was a larger dog. And not a band dog, by the way, not a pit bull, just going to say that. But it was a larger breed dog. And not knowing anything about dogs and safety and behavior, Duke was very dog social at the time. He loved meeting dogs on the street, and he'd often play with them. So I just figured, oh, hey, Duke, do you want to go meet this friend? And I allowed Duke on leash to approach this unattended, tied up, large breed dog who stiffened up and then within a second launched at Duke, growling, and his front limbs actually grabbed him like so, and pinned him down. And Duke squealed and managed to slip away. And he escaped his collar because the collar was too big because I didn't know how to size it properly. And he literally tried to climb up the brick wall to escape. And people in the neighborhood saw what happened. A person in a car stopped and said, I saw what happened. That dog is dangerous. That dog should be seized. And that was the incident that I think was the catalyst for his dog aggression to develop, because prior to that point, he really did enjoy meeting and playing with every dog we ran onto in the street. And it's my lack of knowledge. I just didn't know. I didn't know I didn't know that dogs could be dangerous. And I also made some assumptions. I made the assumption that if someone were to leave their dog tied up outside of a store unattended, they must be safe, right? Because who would leave a dangerous thing out unattended? But that speaks to some of the naivete that I had as a new dog owner. I forgive myself for that now, but I often wonder, what if I knew what I knew now and I had brought home this hunting beagle, and knowing what I know now about safety and canine body language, would he have been a different dog? And I think the answer is yes.
Well, I know that you've just shared that you forgive yourself, and I still feel appropriate to say I'm sorry that happened, for both of you, for Duke, for your partner, for you. I mean, I imagine when Heidi came out of the store and she had to put the pieces together and figure out what had happened. It was incredibly stressful for her as well. And I also know that there's many listeners of this show, probably most of the listeners of this show, who have their own Duke story, or being in a situation where potentially their inexperience at the time, or lack of knowledge, or just the inappropriateness of other people's behavior, put their dog and safety at risk. And you've said you forgive yourself now, which suggests that for a while there, did you feel pretty guilty about that? Like, how did you navigate to forgiveness? Because that's not an easy thing to do always.
Oh, for sure. Because you tell yourself, how could I be so stupid? I I allowed him. I even encouraged him to go say hi. He was pulling because he wanted to go say hi, and I was like, "Go say hi to a friend." So you can't help it, and especially as his aggression became its worst, by then I was able to connect the dots. And but on the flip side, I just didn't know. And in 2006, 2007, there wasn't social media. YouTube, if you remember what it was like in 2006, you'd play a video and within 10 seconds, there'd be a spinning like a wheel waiting for you to buffer. Like there just weren't as many resources. And the books that we had bought were very basic. They were like how to teach your dog to sit, lay down, come and heel. And it was lure reward based training. And it certainly wouldn't talk about these are the things to keep your dog safe from. Nowadays, even basic dog owners know, like, oh, on leash breedings are risky. Watch out for dogs that could be dog aggressive. There's just so much more information out there right now. But in 2006, it was pretty sparse. So, for all those reasons, I do forgive myself. But what is interesting is I didn't realize the ramifications of that incident until later when I connected and the dots and learned that about how single event learning and trauma can cause some very, very sticky emotional associations and cause some very serious, long lasting behavior problems. So all I knew was that he was largely physically uninjured. His ear had a little bit of a tear in it, so it was bleeding just a small amount, but nothing that we couldn't treat with pressure and polysporin. So we didn't even realize the gravity of the situation till much later.
And so what happened? What happened next?
So on top of that incident, we also were taking him to a dog daycare. So I add the next mistake I made. The dog daycare was over populated. There were too many dogs in too little space. The staff weren't educated in canine behavior. And what we noticed was two things happened. The first month or so that he was going to the dog daycare, he would pull to go in. He was very eager to go in. And we would often see as we left, he would actually play with his friends and have a good time. But then shortly after that incident with the dog at the supermarket that was tied up, we started noticing that he was reluctant to go into the door of the dog daycare. And one morning, I remember Heidi and I were there together. He full on put the brakes on and was clutching the pavement and weight shifting away. We had to almost drag him into the daycare. And I'll never forget what Heidi said. And I laugh about it now, but Heidi says, Andre, I don't think Duke wants to go to daycare anymore. And obviously, a dog that is literally clutching the pavement and like weight shifting away from a door is clearly saying something. But as new dog owners, we didn't recognize that there were potential dangers at a dog daycare. And then the final straw at that dog daycare was due to all the stress that was occurring in there. They put him on a citronella collar because he was howling too much. One day, a visitor to the daycare entered, and the daycare only had a separation that was up to about hip height. And it's the person's fault, but he put his hand in there to pet dogs as he was walking through the daycare area, and Duke nipped the person in the hand. And that's when we got the call from the daycare and the conversation. And that's when we pulled him out. But by that time, we were starting to see 1 out of 10 dogs he would meet would end up in him stiffening and then vocalizing and lunging towards their neck. And then it became 2 out of 10, then 3 out of 10. And then he started vocalizing before they even met. So at 5 feet, 10 feet. And we started being worried about having him meet dogs on the street. At the off leash, where he was fine for a little longer, it came to a head when he actually went after a French bulldog that was not causing any issues. I wasn't there for this, so Heidi relayed the story, but Duke went after a French bulldog and I'll just use the word attacked him with bite inhibition, but caused that French bulldog to then have a puncture on the face. And the entire park, all the owners were, mortified, concerned. Heidi was absolutely embarrassed and ashamed, and she had to leave in tears. And that's when we stopped taking him to the off leash and really, really started looking into doing something about this.
Well, again, I have so much empathy for Heidi in that situation, and of course the French bulldog and the French bulldog's owners and everyone involved. These are really stressful situations, and just why I'm excited to continue hearing your story and to have you on the show is For those listening, you heard me read Andre's bio at the start. I mean, you aren't, I would say, the typical pet owner. You've really dove into figuring that out for Duke and helping Duke, and then turn that into a passion where you're now helping lots of other learners, humans, and dogs. So I can't wait to hear how you went from there, still in 2007 or around that period, still with buffering YouTube videos, and how you got to where you are today. So, when Heidi came home, she told you that story. What happened after that?
My memory is hazy, but I think at that point we both said, all right, no more off leash at the dog park. We have to avoid dogs. And at the time we were taking basic obedience or pet dog classes because the rescue had recommended it. Fortunately, the place we were going to was positive reinforcement based. It was a lure reward school. And the criteria the rescue gave, which I really appreciated, was look for school that uses food. That was the only instructions. And there were two schools that we found, and one on their website said, "Food is a bribe. Don't use food. We teach our dogs using praise and blah blah blah." It was a compulsion school. And then the other school, which is a lure reward school, and I'll shout them out. Who's Walking Who was the dominant positive reinforcement based school in Toronto at the time, and we did multiple levels of classes with them. During the honeymoon period, he wasn't reactive, so it was just us taking him to a pet dog school. But as he became reactive, we did reach out to them and ask for a referral for help with his aggression. They started noticing it in the level 2 class when he would just randomly sort of lunge and go after dogs. Not get to them though, because they're on leash. And they were worried. And then we said, yeah, this is developing. And they gave me a referral for a great behavior consultant. And her name is Joan Weston. Her company's Fangs, but no fangs. And she still works in the greater Toronto area. And we booked a private lesson with her. I remember it was a weekday at 2:00 in the afternoon. So both Heidi and I had to request time off from the office, which was granted because we told them how important this was. It took a long time to get an appointment with Joan. And she showed up and she really, really sort of opened the door to like, this is the path. And some of the things that I'll never forget, she shows up and directly in her pant pockets is chicken breast, like not in a treat pouch, not in a Ziploc bag, but just like meat in her pockets. And she went through the Q&A with me in terms of history taking. And then we really quickly went out for a walk. And finally we saw the path because he was very food motivated. Duke would love food and he would often eat while over threshold. But we were able to at least start doing basic focus and attention exercises. And what we were taught to do, I mean, the lesson was quite a while ago, but my interpretation of it was when Duke sees dogs on the street, call his name and just feed him. And that was just the single skill we worked on. And that was really the 180 that got me in the right direction.
Well, firstly, you Canadians have awesome names for your businesses. Who's Walking Hoon, Fangs but no fangs. Awesome. And I love that advice from the rescue, which was just look for classes and schools and organizations that use food. I think that's as relevant in terms of being good advice now as it would have been back then. Such an easily distinguishable, simple criteria for laymen and pet owners to go to filter through the plethora of businesses that they can't distinguish between when they go online using a Google search. And Google says, here's 10 options. I mean, what are you meant to do when don't know any better, right? You look at price, you look at fancy websites, but I love that. Just do they use food or not? It's that super simple. So you met Joan from Fangs But No Fangs, and you said that you immediately saw the path forward.
Yeah, because he ate while over threshold. But you know what? In an urban environment, that's okay. Like we often say in 2024, or don't train over threshold, train sub threshold. We know that in general. And there's no question when I look back at some of the early videos that we took, and they weren't even smartphones back then. It was like our digital camera. We'd take videos of Duke and I and Heidi and Duke. Like you could see that he was over threshold, but he would still turn and eat food. And in the end, the most important thing that came out of that was just hope for me and the fact that I could enjoy walking my dog again. Because if you can't enjoy walking your dog again and you live in a condo, then you are sort of in the death spiral of like no way out. So even though most of the time our training was over threshold, he would start looking at dogs and turning back, and I'd feed him chicken, and I could get past dogs on the street with no drama. People in the building started commenting, "Oh, Duke's doing so much better. I don't hear him howling anymore." He was the loudest beagle ever. So if he went over threshold anywhere within blocks of our building, people would hear it. He's that loud. And that was really the reinforcement for me as the human to be like, I'm going to keep on doing this. I'm going to keep on working on this. Okay, what's next? What's next? What do I do next? And that really motivated me to dig deeper. And the next thing I did shortly thereafter was, it was from Joan. She gave us a reading list and she wrote it on a piece of paper. She handed it to me. And shout out to Dogwise, because Dogwise was my next major sort of like lifeline or like rest flotation device, because I bought the books that Joan wrote about. So I bought all of Patricia McConnell's little booklets. Feisty Fido was the key one, the blue one. And I also bought at the other end of the leash, that's her longer book. And I also bought Turid Rugas's Calming Signals book and DVD. And that was sort of my first foray into effectively what is dog training content that is targeted towards professionals. Although many pet owners read these things too, but come on, once you go on Dogwise, if you have an account on Dogwise, whether you're a pro or not, you're now in the world of being a dog nerd. So, and eventually you just start absorbing more and getting more DVDs. This is 2007-8 at the time. More DVDs, more books, more Dogwise orders. And the next thing you know, you're taking courses that professionals take. You're reading books that professionals read. You're watching videos that professionals read. And at what point do you start becoming a little bit indistinguishable from a professional, especially if in an unregulated industry? And I can't quite remember the exact transition point, but in 2009, especially, I learned about Grisha Stewart's behavior adjustment training, the 1.0 version, got her DVD, started incorporating the idea of, oh, it's not just about chicken and just feeding your dog food for counter conditioning. There's functional reinforcement here. Duke just wants to feel safe, right? That makes so much sense. And as things started coming together and incorporated functional reinforcement, thanks to Grisha's material, Duke got better and better and better. And that made me feel really happy and really proud. And I knew that our city, our community needed people that could help people through the same journey that I had. Because if I hadn't had that appointment with Joan that took weeks to wait for, where she could only see me on Thursday at 2 p.m., where I had to take a day off of work, I don't know what I would have done. I was really at a loss for what to do. And remember, this is 2007. So I wanted to be like, and Joan lives far from Toronto. It's like, why isn't there people like Joan working in Toronto? And that's what gave me the idea of, you know what? If I'm going to start a business one day, it might as well be something like this, because it produces so much good for people and dogs in our community.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing all that. I like the way you described who you identified as at that time, in terms of once you subscribe to Dogwise, you're pretty much a dog nerd. And becoming indistinguishable. I mean, I know for us at Animal Training Academy, most of our listeners are intermediate to advanced, and they're professionals, but we do have that cohort. That's you. We love you, of non-professionals who are probably listening to this and going, "Oh, I'm Andre," and they're questioning, like, do I start charging people for advice? Or and you did, to help the listeners understand that 2007, you weren't a owner of a dog training business. You were a
Account executive for a American technology company with their offices in Toronto, in Canada.
with your degree in commerce from the University of BC. So, I mean, walk us through a decision to walk away from that life, because it sounds like you had a career, you had a partner, you had your house, your life was heading in a certain direction. And that's part of your social fabric. I am Andre. This is what I do. And suddenly you've pivoted. And I imagine that wasn't a simple process, or a simple, you woke up one morning and you're like, all right, I resign. Let's start this business. Like, walk us through that journey. And I know it's going to be super helpful for a lot of our listeners who are or are in that space as they listen to this episode.
That's right. Well, sometimes things happen to you, and then the saying about turning lemons into lemonade happen. And around 2008, if listeners remember, this was the subprime mortgage crisis in the United States, where homes were being walked away from because they suddenly became valueless. And the result of that crisis was a recession, a major recession. And being in sales, it's hard to make a living if people aren't, or companies in this case, weren't buying because they were concerned about the climate of the economy and whether they would be able to hit their revenue targets. So 2008, 2009 was a very difficult year to be in sales. And since then, there have been other recessions as well. So I found myself, through largely no fault of my own, in a situation where it would have been a tough year. And I found myself in a position where I was effectively being managed out of the organization that I was working in. And rather than fight it, I decided to just go with the flow. And I exited my very stable employment with a tier one company that I still have a good relationship with. I still connect with a lot of the folks that I was peers with or that I reported to this day. And that was the time where I said, you know what, this is a great time for me to try this. Why not? Because I thought that I could give it a go for 6 to 12 months. And if it didn't work out, I could just go get another job later and maybe keep it as a side hustle. So there was really no downside because effectively I had lost my job. So that's really the catalyst for the experiment. And I'm going to use the word experiment deliberately because I feel like entrepreneurship is nonstop experimentation. It's constant A/B testing of strategies, or it's not even A/B testing. It's more like gambling. You try 10 things, 9 lose money and 1 doesn't, and then you double down on the one that didn't, and then you repeat that process over and over again, and somehow you still keep the lights on. That's effectively what entrepreneurship is. And I figure that was the best time to do it. The other thing that is also good to know as well, especially because in 2024, with inflationary pressures and the fact that we are in a recession in Canada, and I think in the US as well, and many other parts of the country, of the world, pet dog training in 2008 actually increased, which is another reason why in 2009, it's like, maybe I should give this a try. And the thing that I think often occurs in recessions is what gets hit is high-end luxuries that are a bit of a stretch. That's my gut feel. But people will then spend money on what we call small comforts. So instead of going on a big vacation that costs thousands of dollars you have to save up for, they might take their entertainment budget and instead go to a nearby weekend getaway where there's no flight, but they still get that small luxury. And I feel like pets in 2008 was that small luxury for people that were feeling a little stressed out. They could spend money on their dog, treats, accessories, toys, and these sorts of things to get a little bit of joy for a relatively small amount of money. So I feel like in recessions, pet businesses are fairly safe, especially the way people look at their dogs, their family members, and it's one of the last things people cut their spend on if they look at dogs like family members.
And so at that time, was that you starting When Hounds Fly, or was there a predecessor to When Hounds Fly?
When Hounds Fly was the first brand, and it was the same orange color that Heidi, who's a graphic designer by trade, helped me pick, and the same logo, which is a beagle silhouette with wings. So it's always been that since day one. And I officially sort of bought the domain name in 2009 and started playing with some of the messaging and a basic website. It didn't do anything because I knew that prior to starting the company, all right, I've cobbled together a bunch of informal training, which makes me an amateur, but I did want to have something with weight behind it. So part of my research about launching the business was, okay, I should get some external body to certify me. And at the time, there were 3 that I researched and shortlisted. The first was the San Francisco SPCA, the in-person version of the academy. which unfortunately at the time I looked, for some reason, had just wound down. Like I had just missed that opportunity. And it would have been so cool though, because at the time, I think what you did was you stayed in San Francisco for 1 or 2 months and you worked at that facility at the shelter for that time while receiving your training. That would have been amazing. So, but that wasn't running at the time, and I think it was being wound down. So that that opportunity wasn't available. The other one I looked at, I think it's still around. It's James O'Here's CASI, CASI. Uh, and I liked some of the materials that I saw, but it was all distance learning and it was all basically online and distance. And that made me go, because I had never really done a lot of formal professional training hands-on. I had taken multiple levels of pet dog classes, but I did want some aspect of someone watching me or me watching someone live. And that's why I chose in 2009 to do Karen Pryor Academy, the dog trainer professional program, as all right, this is going to be my big capital investment. 6-month program. I'm going to go see Steve Benjamin, the faculty member in Endicott, New York, 4 times. It's going to be a road trip with Duke, Heidi, and I, and my foster dog at the time, Petey. And I'm going to do this. And Karen Pryor Academy became the thing that allowed me to say, okay, now I feel comfortable taking money from people, because just the random collections of DVDs and books and stuff was good, but it wasn't enough. And I'm glad I did, because when I took Karen Pryor Academy, it made me realize, wow, I really didn't know that much, or I had a lot of holes, and a lot of holes were filled in because of it.
I'm thinking of a member of Animal Training Academy just now who is 2009 Andre in female form, but is is in that same boat. I think that particular thought of I need some legitimacy, or I need some certification or proof that I'm an authority on this, and I'm stuttering a little bit because I'm choosing my words. I don't think you can say you're an authority if you don't have those, or if you've only watched DVDs and read books. So looking for that thing. So I think there's a lot of people in our audience who can resonate with that because they've been through that, or are currently doing what you did and weighing up their options of what certification they are actually going to invest their money in, because let's be honest, it's not a small financial decision. Like that is
Not at all, not at all.
and depending on what you're doing in life, that might be a discussion with your partner about, you investing quite a lot of money into this program. So how did that transpire then and lead to you now being a teacher of that program?
Well, it was a long gap. So I received an invitation, or to have a conversation with Ken Ramirez, who's the executive vice president of training. He's basically the head of training with the Karen Pryor organization. I think it would have been around 2000 or 2001, and that a number of their faculty members were retiring or no longer teaching. So they had a need to increase the number of teachers of the program. And also they have their own growth goals as well. So naturally, increasing the number of people that offer the program in different markets also helps them meet their business objectives as well in terms of reaching more people. So that was the catalyst for it. And I'll actually also disclose too, they never really explicitly said this, but I can't help but think that increasing diversity in the faculty is important as well. So males are in short supply in the positive reinforcement, force-free dog training world. So, and then also people who are of the global majority, to use the more woke term, or like PC term, people who aren't white are less so these days, but definitely in 2007 were very rare. So I think that increasing diversity for all organizations is a goal. So I can't help but feel like that would have been a good reason to reach out to me as well. And I was flattered and honored. Like who would turn that down? So I interviewed for the position. It went well. Obviously, they decided they wanted to move ahead with me. And I did join the faculty with a group of three other people that were joining at the same time, like new blood or fresh faces, if you will. And it was during COVID, it would have been 2000, 2001 that this ramp up in training process was occurring. So these were done over Zoom, where Ken spent time with us directly. And we were also matched up with other faculty members to audit their workshops, which are all running on Zoom at the time as well because of lockdown restrictions in different parts of the world. And next thing you know, the onboarding program is done. I worked with the team to set the dates. I have my own facilities in Toronto, and we hung up the shingle and people started signing up, and the rest is history. The first workshop I ran would have been in spring, summer 2021. And I've been doing 2 or 3 workshops per year since.
And just to clarify, you were saying 2000, 2001, but you meant 2020.
Yeah, I often mess that up. Thank you. 2020,
No,
since
it's
2021. Yeah, I always.
In my mind, I was like, was Ken on running it in 2000?
Yeah, no, thank you. 2021 is when I started. Yeah.
I do that all of the time, so totally get it. And okay, so we've kind of jumped quite far ahead here. I can ask you questions for days, Andre, but I am aware that we've been talking for nearly the length of an entire episode. So quickly fill us in between 2009. This is a couple of decades. Or sorry, a decade, not a couple of decades. See, I just did it. Between 2009 and 2021, you started when Hounds Fly. Ken asked you to be on KPA. What were the big milestones or the big events that happened in that decade between 2009 and 2021 that helped you become and shaped who you are today and your purpose and your drive in life?
I think the first half of it was continuing to learn. So many amazing teachers. I remember in 2011, and make sure I get my years right. 2011, I attended a multi-day seminar with Kathy Sadeo in Endicott, New York, hosted by my instructor, Steve Benjamin. And I remember her really teaching me how counter conditioning and classical conditioning really works and the rules of it. And that really informed how I would approach a lot of behavior issues from that perspective. Clicker expos over the years, in the early days especially, watching amazingly clean clicker trainers made me realize how far I had to go in terms of my own mechanics, even though I had already done the Karen Pryor Academy in completion. And then applying that to the real world. So I think one of the reasons why I've had success as a business owner is because in the end, our training gets results for our clients. And I know in positive reinforcement circles, sometimes the prioritization of results for owners or guardians is often conflated or associated with compulsion training or not nice methods. And I really feel like we should decouple them. Now, there are ethical standards that we must maintain that are either because of different organizations we've signed on to the different rules and regulations regarding what we do and don't do. But I think that by being a better trainer, by learning from all these amazing people, we get to make our training plans as simple as possible, but not simpler. And when they are as simple as possible, or everything unnecessary is stripped away, people can do it. And if people can do it and you've picked the most important training plan or intervention to focus on, if people just do that one thing really well, the Pareto principle kicks in. And all right, it's only 80% of the whole picture, but it's the bit that is the most important. And that, going back to my story with Duke and Joan Weston, is jeans full of chicken breast. If that's the one thing I left from it, from that appointment, jeans full of chicken breast, that was the most important thing I needed at the time. And it got me the results that kept me reinforced. So by investing in Karen Pryor Academy to learn about clean training and how learning really works from an operant perspective, to making sure we understand how other modes of learning like classical conditioning works, from attending seminars from Kathy Sadeo, to continually learning, we go in and just tell people do these 1 or 2 things and do it really well. And then people say, hey, Andre, it worked. It's not necessarily perfect, but they're happy. And when people are happy with the outcomes because we got them results they wanted, that's when they refer. That's when you build a reputation. And that's something I really focus on up until this day. And I try to make sure that my team keep that mentality in mind. And I think that our team is really good at that.
Yeah, and I really like that. I feel like people in life, like especially in areas where they are feeling or stress or frustration or overwhelm, for example, a dog that they have challenges with, they want to be led. They want someone who understands, who knows what they're talking about, to just tell them what to do. And they want, and my understanding uh, is that people need simple plans, like you've just said. They need to get from one side of the river to the other. They need two or three stepping stones. Add in 20, and suddenly that task becomes unmanageable, and it requires many, too much energy, too much brain power to compute. People switch off, people go elsewhere. So I really like that two two things. I always try to give people like a 3 point plan, five maximum. I think after five, like people are like, no, too hard, too hard. Two's great. Is what I'm saying like part of how you think about this? Like, is it a strategic thing to just give people that really simple plan?
I think it's just good teaching because we know with our animals, you have to consider what are the physical and mental capabilities of the learner that we're working with. So if you think of like we set our dogs up, our animals for success all the time by looking at the dog and saying, well, right now this dog doesn't understand the concept of doesn't well, like Mikey, my new rescue dog, he didn't know how to offer behavior. He didn't know how to be free shaped. He didn't know how to do any of that stuff. So he wouldn't be ready for advanced training. And we know that as animal trainers, but we don't give the same to our human learners. Our human learner is not ready to be able to juggle a leash and a clicker while walking, while navigating a tight urban environment. So it shouldn't surprise people, but I often don't give a clicker, even though I'm from the Karen Pryor Academy and our school is a clicker training school. I don't give clickers typically to people who are struggling with reactivity, and I don't even talk about markers. And similarly, if our learner is feeling really stressed out and overwhelmed, and all they want is for the problem to go away, maybe I don't need them to do the protocol for relaxation and also tons of enrichment and also give them decompression walks. Maybe all I'll teach them on their first lesson, just the first time I see them, is how to shove food in their dog's face when they see a trigger. And I just make sure that before I leave on that first appointment, that they can do that thing really, really well. Because if I tried to cover even 3 things in that first appointment, they'll probably do all 3 poorly and get no reinforcement. In the end, results are relative to what the learner, the human that's paying us money, regards as important. And if the person's stressed out, all they want is relief. And that can be achieved through many different ways. And going back to my story, Duke was over threshold as we shoved chicken in his mouth, but I got what I needed, which is relief. And people reinforcing me and saying, hey, Duke's doing so much better. And me seeing that he would have a walk and not react. And if we focus on the human as the learner, that often makes the training plans we give to the owners regarding the animals suboptimal in some respects. But if you want to keep them in the game and also refer to you because it was successful and do it for the long term, you have to think about the human learner first.
Yeah, well, my understanding and perspective, am starting to get a appreciation and understanding of why you've been successful, because I think that is exactly what we do, but we sometimes lose sight of that. I'm interested to hear your perspective. Is that you said that you with Duke, I think you said you wanted relief, and the trainer who calls you over, or sorry, the client who calls you over to say my dog's jumping on visitors, all they want is relief. They want their friends to come over and not to feel embarrassed, not necessarily what you do with the dog or how you do it. Of course, that's important. We know that. But your job is to get them relief. And I think that to hear you articulate that and to say that as your focus and where your thoughts are at when you're helping clients, it doesn't surprise me at all that you're being successful and those people are referring to you. Is that my thoughts on that reflect some of your own, or do you view it differently?
No, I think you hit the nail on the head. Like, if someone feels like they got what they needed, whatever that is, and I was able to give them a training plan or management plan that still is within the framework of ethics that we abide by, then that's a win. So, to use your example of the dog that jumps over, I don't see as many clients as I used to, but I did see one last year just for that issue, which is a relatively minor issue. Normally they give me the weird ones or the difficult ones, but I saw a client with a friendly dog that jumps on people excessively, and we didn't do go to mat training, or we didn't do desensitization to the doorbell and knocking. Like, I could design the perfect training plan for that, but it would be 5-10 steps. All I said was, he's a lab, he loves food. As soon as someone comes in, keep him behind a baby gate and give him a Kong, and let him lick that Kong while I sit down. And after he's licked that Kong for about 10 minutes, then bring him out on a leash and walk him right up to me while I'm sitting so I can pet him. Those are my only instructions. And it worked well for me. The dog was fairly good with me. And then I said, okay, try that the next time you have people come over. And they wrote back after saying it worked. After he managed to get his pets or licked his Kong, get his pets, he was satisfied. His need for social contact was satisfied. And then he just laid down on the floor, the end. So which plan is more elegant? Which plan is going to get you more views on Instagram because it's complicated with so many steps and fine shaping and criteria splitting? Well, of course, the door knock desensitization, go to mat, transfer the doorbell, door knocked as a cue to go to your mat and stay with duration with the distraction of coming in. Like, all that stuff, of course, is going to be a cooler training plan that gets a training nerd really excited. But the question that our team knows to do is say, that's a cool training plan. Now, who would do that? A professional dog trainer. So I just do Kong, baby gate, and pet the dog quickly. And it gets the same results, but in one visit. And going back to results, like, if you want to compete with compulsion trainers or balance trainers that are mixing aversives, well, that's why they're so successful, because with one visit, they correct all the unwanted behaviors away and use suppression. So be better and be more humble with your training plans that are not as elegant, but get the job done while staying within the boundaries of the ethical framework. And you get to compete with the speed of compulsion trainers. And I think that is what our profession as positive reinforcement or force-free based people, we need to go back to those basics. The trainer with the chicken breast in the jean pocket, to just use a very simple picture. Simple as that.
Love it. Well, hey, we will head towards wrapping up there. Thank you for sharing all of that. Can you just share, before we do though, where those who are listening can go to find out more about you, where Hounds Fly, if they're local? I'm not sure you can share if you do outside of the Toronto region. And if they want to get in touch, where do they find you online?
Sure. So for our pet training business, When Hounds Fly, I think the easiest ways these days is to just hop onto social media. We are at When Hounds Fly, as you'd expect, on Instagram and TikTok. You can find us on Facebook as well. Our website is whenhoundsfly.com. And while we offer in-person classes that are brick and mortar facilities in Toronto, Canada and Vancouver, Canada, we also have started putting up increasingly some of our courses and content online as well. And you can find links to those online short courses on our website too.
Amazing. Well, we will, of course, link to all of that in the show notes. As mentioned, we were going to wrap up part one of this episode here. Andre, this has been so much fun. And thank you very much for sharing everything you have with us so far in this episode. So on behalf of myself and everyone listening, we really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. My pleasure.
And thank you as well so much for listening. This is your host, Ryan Cartledge, signing off from this episode of the Animal Training Academy podcast show. It's our hope today's conversation sparked inspiration and added some tools to your trainer's toolbox. Remember, every training challenge is an approximation towards becoming a better trainer. Embrace the rough patches, learn from them, and keep improving. And don't forget, the path to growing your skills and expanding your knowledge continues beyond this episode. Visit www.atamember.com to join our waitlist and be the first to know when our membership doors open again. There you'll find a supportive community of trainers just like you, working to make a positive difference in the lives of animals and humans alike. Until next time, keep honing your skills, stay resilient, and remember, every interaction with an animal or human learner is your opportunity to create ripples. We're here cheering you on every step of the way. See you at the next episode.